Mass transport, common questions and answers, part 3. The human heart has 4 chambers. In which one of the 4 chambers of the human heart does the pressure reach the highest value? It would be the left ventricle. Explain how the structure of this chamber causes this high pressure. It's got thick muscle or thick walls. The table shows the volume of blood in the man's right ventricle at different times during one cardiac cycle. Use information from the table to complete the table below to show whether the valves are open or closed. Use the data in the table to calculate the man's heart rate. So each cycle takes 0.7 seconds. So then you would just do 60, because there's 60 seconds in a minute, divided by 0.7, and you get 85.7. We'll round it up to 86. Describe and explain the effect of increasing carbon dioxide concentration on the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. So it's basically describing the Bohr effect. So it increases or more oxygen dissociation or unloading. So there's more oxygen dissociation or unloading. Or you can say it decreases hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen by decreasing the blood pH, which increases its acidity. So carbon dioxide increases the acidity of the blood because it forms carbonic acid, and this means that it decreases the hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, so it unloads more oxygen to the respiring tissue. The graph shows the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve for fetal hemoglobin and adult hemoglobin. Explain how changes in the shape of hemoglobin result in an S-shaped or sigmoidal oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve for HbA. So you're basically just explaining why it's S-shaped, which is due to cooperative binding. So first oxygen binds to hemoglobin, which causes a change in the shape, which allows more oxygen to bind more easily. This is known as cooperative binding. Tubifex worms are small, thin animals that live in water. They have no specialised gas exchange or circulatory system. The figure below shows a tubifex worm. Oh, I've forgotten to put that figure in. They are the process by which oxygen reaches the cells inside the body of a tubifex worm. Well, it's quite a small animal, so it has quite a large surface area to volume ratio, and therefore it will be by simple diffusion. Using the information provided, explain how 2 features of the body of the tubifex worm allow efficient gas exchange. Well, if there was a picture there, you'd see that tubifex worms have quite a rounded shape with kind of indents, which increases their surface area for faster diffusion, and also they've got a short diffusion pathway to the centre. So they are thin or small, so there's a short diffusion pathway, and they are flat or long or small or thin, so that there's a large surface area to volume ratio. Most species of tubifex worms live at the bottom of ponds, lakes and rivers, where the partial pressure of oxygen is low. Pollution of water by sewage can cause the partial pressure of oxygen to fall below 0.2 kilopascals. The graph shows the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve for a species of tubifex worm found in a river polluted with sewage. The species of tubifex worm in the graph has 50% saturation of their hemoglobin with oxygen at 0.8 kilopascals, 0.08 kilopascals. Explain how this enables the species to survive in water polluted with sewage. Species of this high saturation, 50% saturated at low partial pressures of oxygen at 0.2 kilopascals, and that is because oxygen is needed for respiration. Species of tubifex worm that live in ponds, lakes and rivers cannot survive in seawater. Use your knowledge of water potential to explain why they cannot survive in seawater. It's because the water potential is higher in worms. Therefore, water leaves by osmosis and the water would die. Explain how tissue fluid is formed and how it may return to the circulatory system. Hydrostatic pressure of the blood is high at the arterial end. Fluid or water or soluble molecules pass out. Proteins or large molecules remain. This lowers the water potential. or the water potential becomes more negative. Therefore, water moves back into the venous end of the capillary by osmosis or diffusion. The lymph system collects any excess tissue fluid which returns to the blood or circulatory system. This links with the vena cava or returns tissue fluid to the vein. The graph shows the volume changes in the left ventricle of a human heart during 2 cardiac cycles. The numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 represent times when the heart valves are open or closed. Use information from the graph to complete the table in part A. Place number 1, 2, 3 or 4 in the appropriate box. So, at 1 and 2, so first of all, 1, this is where the ventricle must have contracted. So the AV valves at 1 are going to be closed because the ventricle is contracting. And once it reaches a high enough pressure in the ventricle, the AV valves, the semilunar valves are forced open. So at 1, the AV valves are closed. At 2, the semilunar valves are open. And then this must be showing, because the ventricle pressure is decreasing, this must be showing diastole, relaxation. And therefore, the semilunar, once the ventricle pressure drops below that of the aorta, the semilunar valves must close. So 3 is where the semilunar valves close. And here is where it drops even further below that of the atrial pressure, so that's where the atrioventricular valves open again, because the atria start to fill up and contract. Use the diagram above to calculate the volume of blood pumped per minute by the left ventricle. Right, so you can see there's 120 minus 40, which is the volume of blood that's pumped, which equals 80. And 1 cycle is 1.24 minus 0.48. You can see that's a one complete whole cycle there. So 1.24 minus 0.8. So then if you do 0.76 divided by 60 divided by 0.76, you get 80 beats per minute, and then you'll just do 80 times 80. Explain the role of the heart in the formation of tissue fluid. There's contraction of the ventricle, which produces a high hydrostatic pressure, which forces water and some dissolved substances out of the blood capillaries. Lymphedema is a swelling in the legs which may be caused by a blockage in the lymphatic system. Suggest how a blockage in the lymphatic system could cause lymphedema. Excess tissue fluid cannot be reabsorbed, therefore it builds up.